Now, possibly one of the most common things that becomes a problem when you're running Pathfinder or really any tabletop role playing game is the speed of play. Encounters should kind of move quickly and logically from turn to turn, person to person, creature to creature, and in an ideal world, that would happen every single time. However, especially with the new remaster rules coming out, sometimes it just doesn't work quite like that. So, one of the things that you can do is you can kind of take a couple tips and tricks in order to try to make speed of play go a little bit faster. So, we'll go ahead and talk about that. But my name is Don. I'm trying to be the SlyStrategist, and let's go ahead and get into it. Now, I don't want to make it sound like speed of play should be the most important thing. It should be enjoyment, and some tables are just going to move faster than others because some tables might be more role play dependent or might want to explain what they're doing in more detail or might be more tactical. So don't think I am just sitting here saying that everything should run quicker because that's not necessarily the case. However, encounters should move somewhat efficiently, allowing the players to savor whatever successes they have, or maybe they can commiserate over the failures they have during a particular turn, and that should be fun. However, if it is constantly broken up by stoppages in play or someone having to look something up, that can be kind of a bit of a bummer. You, as a GM, should be able to efficiently run whatever creatures you're running and NPCs to maintain a brisk pace in the adventure, and you shouldn't really overthink or worry too much about minor mistakes that will happen during encounters or during any type of downtime activity when you're dealing specifically with NPCs. Now, if you are just doing a bunch of normal things, you should be fairly quick in describing these normal attacks and normal actions and normal things that happen. However, you should be spending your time on those critical things that happen, the big hits, the big failures, or maybe the most impactful spells or actions that are occurring during a particular encounter or adventure. Now, let's go ahead and cover a few of kind of the bigger things that can slow things down. And the first one is looking up rules. Now, game slowdown often occurs when people have to stop and look up rules. One of the things that you should strive to do, or you as a player should strive to do, is once again, be prepared, but that doesn't always happen. And a lot of times, and I've mentioned it in a few of my other videos, that a lot of times when I'm under the gun of thinking that I'm holding up the game, I kind of lose my mind a little bit and might miss a few things. But if you have a chance, you should make quick rulings for less impactful issues. If something really isn't going to impact a particular encounter or a particular interaction that much, then maybe just kind of make a quick ruling for efficiency. Now, players can look up their rules during their turn, and that's totally acceptable, but try to minimize that as much as you can. But if it does happen, just make sure that you're talking to your other players, trying to still describe what is going on. Or if you're a player, spend this time in order to look at what your character is doing and what they could be doing next while planning your next turn. A lot of times people say that and they say that blindly, like everybody can do that. However, sometimes if you are 2 or 3 turns from coming up, someone might do something in front of you, or a creature might do something in front of you that might really surprise you and totally change the combat. So you can't necessarily plan everything out, but at least have an idea of what you want to do or how you would like that encounter to happen. While someone is looking something up, feel free to assist them in looking things up, or you could once again, if it is not an impactful thing, as a GM, make a quick ruling and then decide to move forward, and then we can check the rules later and fix it later if it is necessary. Now, you should reserve, as a GM, these rule lookups for really significant and heavily rules-dependent situations. If you do have to describe these things to your players, reading them from the book or making everybody go look things up on Archives of Nethys or on their PDFs or their physical books can be a little bit slow. So maybe summarize the rules in order to avoid disrupting the flow of play as much as you can. And you should also encourage your players. And as a GM, you should encourage yourself to look up rules in advance to streamline gameplay. Now, another big thing that does hit time when you're dealing with an encounter is rewinding events. And that would be when you have done something on your particular turn, and then you realize maybe 1 or 2 turns later, oh, I should have gotten this bonus, or oh, that shouldn't have been a hit, or oh, I meant to do this action instead of this action, or there is an additional action that should have occurred. Now, as a GM, you should allow players to rewind within their turn, but prevent intrusions into others' turns unless it is extremely significant. Some adjustments may be acceptable outside of a turn, but it really depends on the ease and the impact. Let's say if you had an additional 10 points of damage that could have happened on a particular creature and that creature would have died, but you are now 3 turns past when that could have happened. That might be too late, and it might be something that just needs to be taken into account on the next particular round. Now, you need to be consistent in what situations allow this rewinding. If you're going to do it for one person, you should be able to do it for others. And if you can do it for the players, then you might do it for the creatures, but understand that that is also going to kind of take up some time in the playing. And these rulings should stand on significant matters regardless of what you do. This is one of these situations where, as a GM, you always say GM discretion, and it is a bit of a cop-out, and I understand that. But you do need to use your discretion in order to try to maintain a balance to prevent excessive interruptions during encounters. Now, if you are playing at a tabletop, once again, I fully suggest people bring their phone, an iPad, or maybe a computer, have access to Archives of Nethys, especially when the new remaster rules come out, or have access to their PDFs because it's a little bit quicker than looking things up in a physical book, but physical books are totally fine, especially for looking up rules. However, if you do happen to play on a virtual tabletop and that virtual tabletop happens to be Foundry, I have a couple little tips and tricks that I'd like to kind of show you that might help when dealing with turns. Now, here we have a little combat going on with our particular party, and they are basically encountering some fire creatures in a forge. That is not particularly important simply because we're not doing a playthrough, but I just want to show you a little bit about some of the things that you can actually do in order to make it a little bit easier. The first thing I wanted to show is that if you're going to go ahead and do an action, right now it is Craig's turn and he is going to kind of strike at the standing fire. So Craig is going to go ahead and do one of his actions, and he is going to try to strike. He's going to try to strike with his Dwarven War Axe. And the first thing I want everybody to kind of notice here is you want to make sure that the correct things are actually checked on your particular screen or your particular role that you're trying to do. Make sure you're using the right attribute, make sure that your proficiency is correct, make sure your weapon potency is correct, and if you are trying a special modifier that is part of a feat that you have, either make sure that it is on or off as you would like it. Now, there are certain things, like let's say you forgot to bring guidance over to yourself, or you forgot to bring another bonus over to yourself. Rather than spending 20 minutes trying to figure out why something isn't showing up in Foundry, when that is something that you could do maybe during the week when you're not actually playing, if it is just going to occur occasionally or once or twice, you can actually add things into the particular role window just by typing it in. So you could just say, we're going to not type it here, but we could do a missed bonus. And you could have it be a +1, and we will go ahead and do an untyped bonus just because. You go ahead and hit add, and now that will show up here as a missed bonus, untyped with +1 with a particular toggle here so you can have it going or not going. And you can go ahead and roll. And if you notice after the roll shows up, it was a critical failure. Of course it would be. But you will have your strength will show up, your master proficiency bonus will show up, your weapons potency will show up, and the missed bonus will show up as a +1. Now, these show up because I'm using a very specific module, and that would be PF2E Modifiers Matter, which is a fantastic module. Now, before I go ahead and kind of show that a little bit, the one thing I did want to state that if you are adding these particular things in, every single time that you want to go ahead and do something, you will have to go ahead and make sure that everything is showing up on the next particular attack. And you will notice that that particular bonus that we put in only lasted for that one specific attack. So Once again, for guidance, you would only use it the once, but if it was some type of bonus, you might have to type it in every single time. So you would have to go ahead and add the untyped. You would have to add it, and you'd have to make sure the toggle was done in order to make sure that you get that bonus every single time. Otherwise, you're going to miss it. The only other thing that was added was you'll see this multiple attack penalty here, but we go ahead and roll. And you'll see over here that the multiple attack penalty -5 shows up, as well as the bonus that you would like to add. Now, Modifiers Matter is a particular module for Foundry that allows these things to show up, and it is super helpful. As you can see exactly how you got the rule that you got. Now, the one thing I will say is you can go ahead and go into the settings in order to try to control exactly what's showing up. But once again, once you get in there, you could go ahead and go on to PF2E Modifiers Matter, and you can show defense highlights for everyone. And if that's true, defense highlights just as flat-footed -2 will be shown to everyone, not just the GM. I do suggest having that done because it shows to the players that yes, they did flank that creature, or yes, that creature is prone, and it'll actually show the players without the GM having to answer those questions consistently. A couple other ones: ignore crit fail over fail on attacks. I usually have that unchecked. You can ignore specific labels if you would like. In other words, if you wouldn't like that flat-footed or off guard to show up, you could type it in here and exclude it from showing up, and always show defense conditions. If set to true, defense highlights such as flat-footed -2 or off guard -2 in the remaster will be shown constantly, even when they don't matter. When they say when they don't matter is if it wouldn't have applied to that particular role, then it wouldn't show up in most cases. Save your changes. And once again, Modifiers Matter is a super helpful type module that will allow encounters to go a little bit faster simply because the players can see exactly what is going on. Now, I hope this guide was helpful for trying to speed up combat. Once again, I don't think that combat should be the fastest thing in the world. After all, you should savor the combats a little bit. However, there are times when they just seem to drag. You might have a bunch of different players. You might be running 6, 7 people in a party. That can make an encounter take forever. Or it just might be a super complicated part of the adventure with super complicated roles, and that happens. Or, as is the case for a lot of people right now, since the remaster is still new and fresh in a lot of people's minds, you do have to look up rules on occasion. Now, I do find that virtual tabletops do kind of help with that a lot because, especially Foundry that I have seen, does seem to have all the rules already integrated into the particular actions that you're trying to do, and it does make it pretty easy in order to have that done. But if you're doing an actual table, it can kind of show up, and I do hope that these tips help. And if you did like this video, please feel free to like, subscribe, or hit that notification bell. But whatever you do, I hope you have a great day and happy adventuring. Thanks.